What has it just been like for someone who, you spent all this time on campuses and you're just so used to being around the kids?
It's the new norm. The funniest thing about the whole deal is you're taking a bunch of football coaches and you're doing everything with technology-based stuff, which we're not the smartest and the brightest when it comes to technology. So it was a learning curve to figure out how to do Zoom meetings and how to share video and PowerPoints and how can we educate our kids through virtual meetings. And that was kind of what we just kind of worked through at the beginning. It was about the health and safety and making sure that our kids are staying at home and self-quarantining. And then how can we make sure that they're staying in shape by sending them workouts? How do we keep educating them on football? How do we just keep doing our installations? And then we were pretty much glorified academic advisors and making sure they're passing classes. And now we're moving into this new phase where we can start, emphasizing workouts, so where we can start phasing small group workouts back with these kids, but we're still doing all virtual meetings. So now it's still focusing on the health and safety of our student athletes, and working them into small groups until we can get to July, which is going to be our phase 2 of the socialization plan, where you can do larger groups and actually start to probably do in-person meetings when we get to July. So it's been unique, I miss it. I miss these guys. It's just pretty funny. Like you see these kids only through FaceTime and Zoom. When you kind of lose that personal side of things with these guys, where when you get on these meetings, it's more about instruction and moving forward and trying to be as efficient as possible with your time. But I do miss that human element, just being around these guys in the locker room and just coaching and getting out there on the field. So I think I'm more excited than anybody to get back and get this thing back in order.
Is this just like one massive like Zoom meeting, like a football team meeting, or are they, offense, defense, different positions meetings or things like that?
I've encouraged the staff to do as small groups as possible, which is going to take more time and you're going to have to do more meetings, but you lose the attention of everybody. And, there's a lot of different moving parts. People are all over the state of Texas and even the country. And, you're sitting there and you watch it and, a kid gets up and goes to the fridge and grabs a drink and, shuts the door and, there's a dog barking in the background and all that. And there's just a bunch of distractions going on. So we try to make it as small as possible and position based. So when I'm coaching the quarterbacks, I do one-on-one. I just make sure that we just have a one-on-one interaction. When you get with the offensive line, you end up by kind of separating it into the tackles go today, the guards and centers go the next day, and you just got to be efficient with how we do it. We really focused on making sure that our kids were staying at home, staying healthy, staying in shape, and making sure they're passing their classes. And in the meantime, we let time kind of take its course until we figured out, what we can and can't do, because the NCAA has gone through so many blanket waivers on, virtual care logs to just you name it. So I thought we've done a pretty good job of just kind of making sure that we showed the support and the well-being of our student athletes before we actually started getting into football related conversations. And once we felt we had a pretty good idea where the NCAA was going and what could happen, we decided to just kind of implement football instruction through Zoom conference calls, just to keep them engaged. There's some teams out there that are doing a ton of meetings. Well, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves and just kind of ease them in there, keep them engaged. And then now the conversations is about getting these kids on campus and how we're going to work them out and making sure we're following the CDC guidelines and we're doing everything right. There's still a ton of unknown, and I feel really bad for that senior class of kids right now, or, going into where they could get their evaluations and get their to be at least be able to engage with college recruiting. But right now it's from our standpoint, we're just trying to get a list, get a board together and evaluate as many kids as possible and stay in contact with them through Zoom calls and just phone calls and text messages and all social media avenues. But the more talks that you have about recruiting, it's still going to keep getting bumped back. I think the next that they're deciding on moving the dead period all the way to July, and that can actually get to August. I've heard it could get all the way to September. So, you're not getting those camps over the summer to evaluate these kids or go out to their school and evaluate them as well. So it's tough because right now the whole focus is on getting football back in order, making sure that we can get our own players back on campus. And then the next phase is what are we going to do with these seniors in high school and how we can start evaluating them. Hopefully I think the NCAA is going to make some blanket waivers where we can be able to go out and see kids and get them on our campus and make sure that these kids at least get a fair evaluation and hopefully, can have a potential to prove themselves and go and get a scholarship. So, again, I feel bad right now for the seniors to be in high school because there's just so much unknown. And, you work so hard your entire life to get to this moment. Now everything's put to a halt. So I know eventually we're going to find a way to make it work.
It seems like there's still a major effort to still have the season in general. Is it all kind of still scheduled as planned?
It's scheduled as planned. That's kind of the way. There's so many opinions and there's not really any rules about this yet. So we as a conference, and when we sit down in our conference meetings, it's about moving forward. And we've had a lot of discussions about it. Like we can start voluntary workouts on June 1st. They've all agreed that if you can get your kids voluntarily on campus, then go for it. What they want is they just want to make sure that we can start on September 5th as our first game. And it's going to be a little bit different. What they're saying is it's going to be an uneven race. Some people are going to start before and some people are going to start after the given time just based off of the federal guidelines and the state and local governments and national governments. So there's just so many different moving parts, but we've all agreed that, we're going to start these three phases of resocialization where we can start voluntary workouts in June of 10 groups or less. And then when we get to July, there's going to be 50 people or less. And then when we get to July 27th, we got a 6-week return to play protocol so we can start September 5th. So that's kind of the vibe, and that's kind of where it's going. And that's just kind of the plan that we're sticking to it. When this thing hit, every single conference put together a proposal, and when you read through what the Big 12 is doing and the ACC and, the Conference USA and the Big 10 and the SEC, you just read their proposals and they're all very similar, and everybody's kind of came to a consensus that we have, if everything's going as is, we'll have a 6-week return to play protocol starting July 27th, and we'll start football September 5th. But we also have the 5-week plan and the 4-week plan. So, it's just, it's whatever they want to give us. And I think, you just have to be aware of where if we're flattening the curve and we're doing everything right and they feel comfortable moving forward, then, we should be ready to have plans. I have a 4-week plan, a 5-week plan, a 6-week plan, an 8-week plan. I got a 12-week plan. It's, you just got a lot of plans, so once we just kind of start this resocialization and we start kind of experimenting with getting kids back on campus in small groups, and if that continues to be okay and we just keep building off of it, we keep showing positive results, we'll end up starting this thing on time September 5th.
Obviously no one wants to see these games being played without fans. It's such a big part of the experience. What does it look like for fans in the stands?
I've heard a lot of different scenarios with this. It's kind of like what we're going through right now. Like there's going to be the re-socialization is what they keep saying to us. And there's phases of it where small groups into kind of medium groups into large groups. And I think you could probably see something similar to that in college football where it's like a 25% capacity and then it eases itself up to like a 50% capacity and until full strength. But you never know. Like I just think that they're right now, the plan right now is to get our kids on campus where we can be able to start the season on time. And then the next phase is how many, people that are we going to allow in and where it goes from there.
Has there been any talks about just doing a conference schedule? Because I've seen that also kind of eliminating the non-conference games and just figuring out how to get the conference schedule done.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I was telling you about was the 4-week, 5-week, 6-week plan. That is to start on September 5th. And then there's other proposals in plan where you bump it back 15 days And everything was kind of in 2-week increments at the beginning of these conversations, where if we're not comfortable with the September 5th plan, then you bump it back 2 weeks. If that's not good, then you bump it back another 2 weeks. And really, they said they could get to around October 15th, where we would just bump back the season a month. But if you got past that October 15th mark, then they would start talking about cutting non-conference games and just kind of get to your conference games. So there's been all sorts of talks. There's even been talks about if we got to worst case scenario, you start it up in February. But there's a lot of moving parts that go into this. There's contracts with hotels and plane charters and food companies and vendors and just all sorts of stuff that you've got to work through. It's going to be interesting. The one that came up the other day was we're going to go on with the season. And if there's somebody that's not allowed to play, then that just turns into a bye week, or you have to find someone else that would actually play in that slot, and they kept talking about how TCU plays Cal and Alabama plays USC week 1, and that they would say that if California couldn't play, then TCU and Alabama would play. They've even talked about that. So I just think there's too many contracts, too many things involved, that there's going to have to be a ton of discussion about that before they start making those decisions.
As like pro leagues kind of sort of get back into things, they're talking about testing the players or do like temperature checks on the players. Any discussion about doing anything like that on the collegiate level?
Yeah. And we'll have to start that June 1st. It's our protocol of what these kids can do. It's like today, the gyms are open across the state of Texas, and what are they allowed and not allowed to do and use there's been talks about how you don't use your showers. You're going to have them shower at home. You can't use your locker room. They're going to have to change in a certain area where you sanitize it, and also make sure that we're washing their clothes accordingly. But like when you walk into the building, they're going to have temperature checks. There's a certain temperature that will put them to the student health center if they're over that limit. I don't know what the limit is exactly. It's probably over 100 degrees. Those are the kind of things that we're discussing, and then you'll have symptom checks with questions. And eventually that's how the protocol is in these small groups. And when you get to larger groups, there's probably hopefully they have like antibody tests done by then, or just if they feel comfortable with one of those testing policies. But that's kind of how our return to the campus phase is. But then they've talked about how everybody will have to do a COVID-19 test weekly. If we're going to start playing in front of fans and where we're at. The other discussion is we don't know the rules yet, or just the guidelines on if someone does contract the virus and how we quarantine them. So there's a lot of baby steps with this, and we're very cautious, and we're making sure that we're doing everything as right as possible, and following the guidelines, and making sure that we're running a clean and safe environment. I feel really good where we're at. I feel great about our coaching staff. I got a great group of men that are great teachers and great communicators. And when you come to a time in a crisis like we're in right now, you have to be great communicators and teachers. And I think that's what we have. Like we've been working through all these issues, and football's kind of built on times of adversity, and you got to be able to talk your way through it and work together as a group. And I think we've got a really good plan in place for these kids moving forward. And I'm still fortunate to be able to get through 5 spring football practices with these guys, and we have a direction, and we understand the guys that are going to help us out next year and who we are. We know. And that's comforting to me. And now it's time for us to just make sure that we keep putting these kids in the right positions and working through these times, and get to the season. I think that we've got this thing going in the right way. We're recruiting well, and now we just got to wait through these times and make sure that we keep staying in shape and doing the right things, and just wait this thing out until we can get out there and start playing football again.